Remember, the Paul Urbahns Show comes to you completely unrehearsed and live. Live.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to another Radio Days. I am Gary Music Miller, and for those of you that are brand new to our podcast here, our webcast, if you're somebody new, you don't know much about me, I'll just quickly explain that I spent from 1971 to 2010 on the radio in Huntington, West Virginia, Ashland, Kentucky, Ironton, Ohio, in that market. And I'm probably best known as the radio guy from WKEE, where I lasted from 78 to 2009. I was there 31 years. I was music director during the entire time. If you are a regular viewer, we welcome you and thank you for joining us. If you're a subscriber, very, very good to have you along. If you don't subscribe after today's show, you may find out you're actually missing something, and we urge you to subscribe, and we thank our subscribers. Sharp viewers of the show will notice this is not Dave Black sitting to the left of me. Dave relinquished his chair today, although it's very much his show. He does the editing, directing, downloading. We use his equipment, and we have this beautiful mock studio at the West Virginia Museum of Radio and Technology. But you can come down here and visit anytime. They're open Saturdays and Sundays. Saturdays at 10 a.m., I believe, and Sundays at 1. It's a great way to spend your weekend. But with me today, that's all I can think of saying right now, except please write us, keep in contact with us. You can leave a message below the video, or you can write me at RDWGMM, Radio Days with Gary Music Miller, abbreviated, at gmail.com. And I always look forward to reading those. It's the best way to get a hold of me. You can also find me on Twitter, on X, at Gary Music Miller, and I have had a few people ask me questions that way. With me today is, once again, you may recognize him if you've been with us. He was with us back on season 3, episode 13. I did my homework.
You got a better memory than I do, Gary.
Well, I went back and looked. Season 3, episode 13, Paul Urbahns, who describes himself, and I think it's a very good description, as a radio historian. He did some radio himself. And he just knows a lot more than I do. I know what went on from 1971 on to some extent, but I know what went on at Key from 78 to 2009, but I'm not real, he's got a lot more extensive historical stuff than I do. So I don't know what we're doing today, to be honest with you. Paul talked to me, and we said, you want to come on? And last time he was on, we had probably 10 times the number of listeners, viewers, people that hit the link to visit us than we normally do. So he's really, as far as I know, the most popular guest we've had on. Well, so congratulations for that. I wish I had
congratulations.
A medal to give
and
you.
As far as I know, Gary, am I the first return guest?
You are indeed.
So we're making history here, folks. So that's great.
And the first guest that wasn't really, most everybody that I've had on has been like somebody that's active in or on the radio,
and in your life,
and in my life, right. And you're the first stranger out there.
And the reason for that,
stranger danger doesn't apply with this guy. Yeah. He's a great guy. Paul is wonderful.
Quick explanation on that is because Gary did not get into radio until 1971.
Right.
I got into radio in 1968. And I left Huntington in 1970. So consequently, I was gone by the time he got into radio. So
the situation had been
that's the
slightly different, we would have
explanation.
passed.
Oh, I'm sure we would have passed,
Absolutely.
crossed paths at some point. Well,
But
anyway,
I'm going to let Paul take care of the show today. So
I think it's very appropriate that we are in the old school building in the Harveytown area of Huntington, West Virginia, because I'm going to educate Gary here a little bit on faster radio that he may not be familiar with.
That's great.
Now, you served at least 31 years, maybe a little bit more, playing top 40 radio.
I did.
And you probably heard a little bit about the history of the subject over the years. But we're going to go back to the very beginning, so to speak, and just hit the highlights as things go on.
Good.
In order, because I'm sure we've got a lot of radio veterans here that may not know. We've got general public here probably that just knows the term top 40 or American top 40 if you followed Casey Kasem back in the days. And unfortunately, Gary, a lot of people think that Casey Kasem invented the countdown show, which is not true.
Okay.
So this will be an educational situation that hopefully anybody that has a slight interest in radio might want to pick up on. Now, believe it or not, when Casey Kasem put his show on, it was nationally syndicated, and they didn't expect to have any kind of problems running this show in the early 70s because top 40 radio had been a common occurrence. Now, as far as I can recall, there was no national top 40 radio program prior to American Top 40 coming on the air, but lots of local radio stations went ahead and did their own countdown each week as they printed their local surveys. So there was local countdown shows and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But believe it or not, the idea of a countdown show goes back as far as 1935 because that's when your hit parade debuted on radio.
Okay.
Now, believe it or not, back in those days, radio programs were generally a half hour. They had trouble getting the program on the network because in the 1930s, radio sounded more like television with the TV tube blown out. You had variety shows, you had dramatic shows, you had westerns and all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
And the idea of doing a countdown show every week, where you're basically doing the same songs every week, no network wanted to touch it.
Yeah.
So what happened was the American Tobacco Company, who made Lucky Strike, decided to fund the program themselves. And over the history of the program, this shows how it was independent from the network. It was on two separate networks at different times, NBC and CBS, depending on what years,
Wow.
and then eventually transitioned to television because it was so popular. And the difference between American Top 40 and what we think of today is back in the 1930s, radio was not what it is now. Now it's more of a musical jukebox, right? And has been through the 60s pretty much, right?
If I may interject, people are always talking about how radio has changed today from the 60s and 70s and 80s when I was on. You don't hear DJs doing what I did anymore, really. And I just tell people it's another phase, you know, back in the very early, back in the 30s, 20s, whatever, you had no television. You listened to Jack Benny, you listened to Abbott Costello, you listened to Gunsmoke, whatever, and you didn't see them. So when radio started transitioning, I think, around 1955, which is when I was born, oddly enough, radio was changing, and people, I know some radio shows were very hesitant to move over to television because it was something new. And when television finally struck gold and took hold, the radio station quiz shows, the westerns, the dramas, whatever, slowly disappeared from radio. So this is just what we're going through today is just another transition.
And I can agree with that.
The syndication computerization and that kind of thing going on now is just another phase, and where a lot of people are not doing live DJs right now. It's hard to tell what it'll be like in another 20, 30, 40 years, and maybe total AI, you know. I mean, who knows?
I could use some AI up here, believe me. Anyway, the whole thing was if you was doing a half-hour show and performing basically the same songs every week, the networks thought that's not going to resonate with people, because the music in those days was primarily sold by sheet music, but their 78s were popular, so therefore the jukeboxes played 78s. So the concept of your hit parade was to take and tabulate the most popular 78s that are played on the jukebox, the record sales from those 78s, and the sheet music that was sold. And they would compile their own survey of the top 7 songs, and to fill out the half hour, they'd play 1 or 2 standards, kind of like what we used to call recurrence on the radio, when you bring an old song back and start playing it. And that started in 1935. And the program was so successful that it lasted until 1959, after it transitioned onto television. Your Hit Parade is on the National Radio Hall of Fame, and I have brought a summary of the program for Gary to read. So if you'll put your glasses on for a minute, Gary, and read that, I will show you a few things relating to Your Hit Parade while he's talking.
Okay, before disc jockeys and top 40 charts became commonplace, there was Your Hit Parade, which I certainly have heard of. I may have heard some old radio on that. A radio institution that billed itself as an accurate, authentic tabulation of America's taste in popular music. Every Saturday night, Your Hit Parade presented the top tunes of the week, saving the top 3 songs for the end of the show. Makes sense. As a nod to longtime sponsor Lucky Strike cigarettes, Your Hit Parade occasionally featured an old favorite as a Lucky Strike Extra. LSMFT for the Batten, Barton, Durston, and Osborne, the show's advertising agency, remained secretive about the methods used to determine the top songs. It was acknowledged that Your Hit Parade's statistics examined sheet music sales and jukebox tabulations before reaching their conclusions. Your Hit Parade debuted April 20th, 1935, moved between NBC and CBS. A television version of Your Hit Parade was simulcast over NBC Radio from 1950 to 59. Your Hit Parade was inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame in 1995.
Now, radio stations would go ahead and do publicity albums occasionally later on, but Your Hit Parade was so popular, not only did they perform the songs of the day as tabulated according to sheet music and so forth, they also made record albums of the top songs. Now, this will be something new to a lot of people. This is an actual record album. So when you open it up, in here are pockets that hold the 78 RPM records. That's where the term record album came from, because it looks like a photo album. Now, later on,
look at this.
When,
isn't that beautiful?
Later on, when the single albums came out and everything went to 33 1/3, we continued to call things a record album, but that's where the original term came from. And probably the best history on this program is this book here called This Is Your Hit Parade. And it's by John R. Williams and tells the whole story. But the funny thing about this, Gary, is not only, since the same type songs was selling almost every week, they had to perform the same songs almost every week, and to keep it as secretive as possible, because everybody in the country wanted to know what the top songs were, and this was one of the most popular programs of all time, so people had to tune in to find out. And then what they would do for the staff that was performing the songs, they actually performed extra songs that were not going to be on the broadcast, so even the staff that was performing the songs did not know what the top songs were. So that's just how secretive Lucky Strike was in performing on Your Hit Parade. Now, Your Hit Parade...
Just the thing that sticks out to me, 1950 to 1959, that just shows how television was gradually working its way into the vernacular and into people's lives. And as television grew, radio started to die. But you may know a little bit about how it transitioned into top 40 rock and roll.
Like you said, Your Hit Parade was so popular, it was simulcast on both radio and television. Yeah. And the fun thing about the television show, and you can find some of these on YouTube, and there'll be a link, hopefully there'll be a link in the description below where you can watch one of them. If the same song was performed on television, say 3 weeks in a row, they had to build totally different sets, and a lot of times came up with a different arrangement because they were not trying to imitate necessarily the record. They were performing the song like you would on a variety show. Now, after Your Hit Parade went off, local radio stations started tabulating their own figures, and I've got an excerpt here from February 27th, 1960. This is Cashbox Magazine from WSAZ. And one of the local DJs, which the name may ring a bell to Gary, submitted the information to Cashbox Magazine. And so just read the top 2 or 3 songs on there.
I never knew Bob Bowen was a radio guy. I don't guess. I'm thinking TV when I hear his name. WSAZ, Huntington, West Virginia. Number 1 was Baby by Washington and Benton. Number 2 was He'll Have to Go by Jim Reeves. 3rd, Theme from a Summer Place. Wonderful song. Percy Faith. I was just looking that up. That had a record at, I believe, 9 weeks at number 1 when it finally turned it over to, there was another song that was 9 weeks at number 1 was American Pie by Don McLean. And before that, Percy Faith held the spot at number 1 for 9 or 8 weeks or 9 weeks.
And believe it or not, that record sold like hotcakes to teenagers and so forth. Because if you ever see the movie A Summer Place, it's about a romance between 2 young people whose parents don't want them to do that. And so that resonated with the teenagers of the day.
Sure did. And there was also a vocal version of that by Chad and Jeremy or somebody like that had a hit. Other songs on here that I recognize from the quote-unquote rock and roll era, Everly Brothers' Let It Be Me, the Ford Preps Down by the Station, Teen Angel, Mark Denning, what a classic, Harbor Lights by the Platters, so, and the original Handyman
by Jimmy Jones, yeah. And so Bob Bowen was a DJ at that time.
Okay.
Apparently, he started at WSAZ in 1956 after he got out of the military for the radio, and he went into the sports department later on and retired in 1990. But he was one of the DJs at the old WSAZ radio. And here is the record survey from WJPS, and all I want you to do is read the opening part up there as to how it's compiled.
WJPS 1330 Top 30, the official Top 30 survey of the Tri-State, according to record and sheet music sales, coin machine operations, and DJ requests, as tabulated by Evansville's #1 music and news stations. Interesting.
So they were still using the basic old Your Hit Parade formula when they were compiling their surveys. In most cities, including Huntington, we had several stations that printed surveys over the years. What they would usually do is they would call several of the main record distributors, or record stores, I should say, in Huntington, Charleston area, and have the store read off the most commonly sold records, usually the top 10, because you'll get one list of 10 from one store, a different list of 10 from another store, and then, of course, the ones that duplicate and so forth. And then you look at the national charts and figure that in there. And that was the job of the program director in the old days, our music director in the old days.
And the music director, yeah, that's what I got to do. But a lot of what I got to do.
What really started Top 40 Radio, since the radio stations had to pick up once your hit parade went off the air, doing local surveys and so forth, there was a broadcaster in California by the name of Bill Drake. And the story that is told is that him and several of his friends were sitting in a restaurant and they had a jukebox there. And after about a half hour or so, they noticed the same basic songs, a lot of the same songs are being played on the jukebox. So he got the idea, well, instead of playing all kinds of music and all kinds of songs, why not just play the few that people want? And therefore, that's how they started coming up with a numbered survey of sorts. Now, Bill Drake is in the Radio Hall of Fame, so if you would like to read a little bit of that about him, I think it explains
I do recognize
how it
his
happened.
Name. Bill Drake was at KYNO AM in Fresno, California. He met Gene Chenault, very familiar name to me, who became his business partner. Together, the pair developed influential radio programming, which streamlined the Top 40 radio format, originally created by Todd Storrs, Gordon McClendon, and other radio programmers in the late 1950s. The format took a set list of popular songs and repeated them all day long. Jingles, news updates, traffic, and other features were designed to make Top 40 radio appeal to car listeners. By early 1964, Top 40 radio had become the dominant radio format for North American listeners. Drake employed his successful measures with KGB AM in San Diego in 1965. In the spring of 65, Drake Chenault were hired by then financially struggling KHJ in Los Angeles. KHJ AM quickly jumped from near obscurity to the #1 radio station in Los Angeles. Additionally, Drake Chenault marketed documentaries like The History of Rock and Roll, 10-episode, 52-hour-long series on which Drake worked as writer and narrator, inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame in 2007. And so that explains to me a little bit about Drake Chenault. I always heard about Drake Chenault.
As far as
I think they had something to do with consulting or ranking stations and whatnot.
As far as it said, as far as the radio industry is concerned, he's the one that developed Top 40 radio.
That's great to know.
Like I said, just based on a limited playlist where you play the same songs. And basically, Gary, the top 10 got played, at least in my memory, about every 2 hours. Because the lower chart records didn't get played as much as the top ones. So when you was going into rotation and so forth, which is a whole different subject we're not going to get into here.
Yeah,
but that meant that it was heavily weighted towards the top 10. So those songs got played more than any of the others.
That was one of the big questions we would have when I was on the radio. Why do you play the same songs over and over?
About every 2 hours.
I said, come answer my phones one day. And I would play a song. As it ended, the phone line would ring and the person on the other end of the line would ask me to play that song. They had just tuned in, apparently, and missed it. So that's why we played songs. We had about a 2 hour, 45-minute rotation on some of those songs. Some of the songs went 3, 4, 5 hours. It just depended.
I want to show you a few local surveys that will reminisce with some of the people. Now, this is the earliest survey I have. I can't say it's the first one ever or anything like that, but this is from WWHY. They were using the Silver Dollar Carousel, which, if you remember, WLS also called their survey the Silver Dollar Survey or something of that sort, because Gary's told me he was a big fan of WLS in Chicago.
Yes, I was.
And so WWHY gave away silver dollars if you was a correct caller or something every now and then. This survey is so weak that you won't be able to see it because it's mimeographed. Back in the day, it was done like in school. Remember how your teacher would type up something on a typewriter and then put it in a mimeograph machine? Later on, things got printed. So here is a survey from 1963, and it's from the same station. In this case, they've got a neat little line in here that says that this week's flavor is chocolate. At this time, they were giving away ice cream, buckets of ice cream. And if you want to notice here, Gary, this is very advanced for 1963. This is actually a top 30 survey, which a lot of stations did not go to that until much later on. Yep. So that was a very advanced concept.
Yeah.
What a lot of people saw around town is something Gary is very familiar with.
Absolutely.
This is the the Tri-State Top 50.
Every time I went into Davidson's record shop, there it was. And
it was printed by the local record distributor in Cincinnati and took into account the best sales from their distributorship. Key Radio also did surveys. This is one that you may want to read the date on.
Survey from February 28th, 26th, I think. It looks like it says 1965. Is that right?
Yeah, 1965.
Okay.
And this is an actual top 40 survey because there are 40 songs on there.
Yep.
However, by August of 1967, Key Radio was printing a top 30 survey.
Top 30 survey.
With only 30 songs on there.
All right.
So as things progressed, and this happened all during the 60s, you had local stations printing surveys, and typically they'd come out on Friday or Saturday, and to help fill your time on the weekend, a lot of times on Saturday afternoon, Saturday night or something like that, the local station would have a local countdown show and say, hey, this is our new survey for the week. That happened up until American Top 40 came on the air, and that was a program that was hosted by Casey Kasem. And it was a nationally syndicated program of popular music. And right here is the logo for American Top 40. And these programs originally came out on disc. And I'll let Gary read here a little bit about, there's two pages there on Casey Kasem for those who remember him.
For July 4th, 1970, Casey Kasem's American Top 40 debuted, and the Detroit native quickly became synonymous with the countdown format. The format, reminiscent of the immensely popular Your Hit Parade programs of the 30s and 40s, allowed Casey Kasem to blend human interest stories with the top songs of the day. Kasem's radio career began as a young actor on The Lone Ranger during his student years in Detroit. He played Dan Reed, the Lone Ranger's nephew, and other juvenile roles. In 1952, Kasem was drafted into the U.S. Army and sent to Korea. During his military service in Korea, Kasem worked with the Armed Forces Radio Service.
And unfortunately,
he continued doing some acting.
Yeah, I know.
I know you know.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's the rest of the story.
Well,
As Paul Harvey used to say,
Yeah. Following his discharge in 1954, he worked as a DJ, disc jockey in Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. In 1969, Kasem began voicing Shaggy on the animated Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?
We all know where Scooby is, right?
It was certainly his voice was very, very recognizable. I remember him playing Robin on a cartoon series. He was the voice of Robin. I'm not sure who did Batman on that series, but that came along in the 60s, I believe. On the week of July 4th, 2009, after 39 years on American Top 40 and a total of approximately 61 years, Casey Kasem ended his run on the radio. Casey Kasem was inducted in the Radio Hall of Fame in 1992, and he passed away June 15th, 2014, which was a sad day for
yes, it
a lot
was.
of us.
And Casey died of Parkinson's type related disease. Do you by any chance remember his sign-off phrase? I'm putting him on the spotlight here because
keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. It was something
he's got
like
it.
that.
You got it. It's exactly right. I had it written down just in case. American Top 40 originally started syndicating on long play albums such as this, and stations was able to get this. It was called a barter program, where so many minutes of the commercial time was sold to national sponsors, and so many minutes was held by the station locally to run local commercials for a local client.
There's still
Key Radio started airing it in 1971.
1971,
Right.
okay. 7 years before I got there.
It's still on the air.
I think we ran it. Yeah, it's funny. There are satellite stations that play a full week. They'll say this is the week of June 12th, 1973, and you'll hear the entire top 40.
Believe it or not, the American Top 40 with the current hits is still on the air, and Ryan Seacrest is the host.
I believe that. What doesn't?
So
Ryan Seacrest too.
That basically,
when I left with Key, Ryan Seacrest took my shift. And
was it syndicated or satellite or something?
It was syndicated and satellite.
Okay,
yeah,
there
in
you
fact,
go.
I think Ryan's still on WKEE.
Well, we don't blame him, do we?
No,
he's making some money.
we try not to,
Okay.
even though he's now on Wheel of Fortune, I believe, and several other things. But,
Meanwhile, Gary's retired here in Huntington, West Virginia.
that's right. Yeah,
Talking about times gone by here
absolutely,
at school.
absolutely.
That's our show, Gary.
Okay, well, I appreciate you coming by and feeding me with a lot of information. I do want to thank again the Museum of Radio and Technology in Huntington, West Virginia. They're at 1640 Florence Avenue in Huntington, and you're invited to come by and see their tremendous display of technology and radio and television equipment and stuff that'll just blow you away. And there's nothing like it in the area. And they allow us to come into one of the studios that they have. They actually have mock studios here, and we do the show every couple of weeks or so. Dave and I try to get together every 2 weeks, but occasionally it doesn't work out. But let me run down their website of the museum. It is www.mrtwb.org. They're on Instagram at mrt.wv, Twitter at wvmrt, and Facebook you can search under Museum of Radio and Technology. Paul, it has been an absolute wonderful experience. I have learned a lot, like you said. People talk about how different radio is today than it was in the 70s and 80s when I grew up. I grew up on the radio. People will say, I grew up with you. And I say, I grew up too. I was 22 years old when I started at WKEE, I believe, 22 or 23. And I started playing top 40 at WCMI in Ashland, Kentucky in 1974, and went on to play top 40 in 1977 at WAMX, which was a top 40 station going up against Key.
You had trouble holding a job, didn't you?
That was it. That's what people asked me that. And I said, no. Actually, what happened is every time I applied for a job, I got it. And I don't know what that speaks to. People's lack of they say that speaks to your talent, and I say, well, I don't know. It speaks to the lack of people's judgment that hired me, kept hiring me, and that's how Gary Music Miller came. If you ever want to know about me, episodes 1 to 3 on this very show, we started out talking about how I got into the business, and at 16 years old with no voice and no experience, and that's a story in itself. But Paul, thank you. I hope we get to see you again from occasion to occasion, and thank you guys for tuning in to today's show. If you will share it or subscribe again, the subscription part really looks good.
And it's absolutely free.
It is free.
And if you are watching us on YouTube, do Gary a favor, and in the comment section, if you're in West Virginia, write down the name of the town you're listening from. And if you're out of state, just give us the state so Gary can have a better idea of where his viewers are and so forth. That would help a great deal.
That is fantastic. Let us know where you are. I was amazed a couple of years back, year and a half back, to have a listener in Canada that views us.
You're on the World Wide Web, Gary.
Yeah, and it's amazing because people ask me why we can't get out to more people, and I just think it's one of those situations where we have no way to advertise what we do. But what we do is radio, and when we get the chance, when we don't have a radio guest or subject, we talk music. And we center on the 60s, 70s, and 80s, so you're a perfect guest. Thank you. Thank you from Paul Urbahns. Thank you from Gary Music Miller. Dave Black in the background. He'll be back with us probably next time. He will be back with us next time. I'll make him come back. Thanks again for listening to Radio Days with Gary Music Miller. And watching, it'll always be listeners to me because I'm a radio guy. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.